How's it going? So in today's Blender tutorial, we're going to be creating this abstract animated loop. It's super fun. So the way it's going to work is we're going to first build our scene and animate it using textures, and that's where we're going to loop it. Next, what we're going to do is create variations by duplicating what we already built to make it look random and really cool and almost satisfying looking. After that, we're going to dive into lighting. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to create a really cool material that's going to randomize the placement of different colors all over our different instances. So we'll get into that right after this quick shout out. Welcome to Real-Time Materials, a collection of customizable procedural materials compatible with Eevee and Cycles. With over 6 years of experience, I have created an add-on currently containing 240 materials across 14 surface categories. This add-on will speed up your workflow, allowing you to stay creative while maximizing your artistic output. You might be thinking, what about image textures? Image textures are easy to set up but don't give you any control. Real-time materials are loaded with custom properties, giving you the freedom to change roughness, color, and all kinds of patterns. You can change the shape of wood, the direction of cloth weave, and the size of scratches, among many other parameters. Even if you already know how to make procedural materials, imagine the time you will save if you could apply those materials in one easy click. All right, we're here in Blender. I'm currently using 3.4.1, but if you have geometry nodes, it should work. So let's go ahead and introduce a plane. That's really the only amount of geometry we're going to need. Let's hop over into the geometry nodes workspace, and I'm going to delete this window. Let's go ahead and click new. I'm going to go and delete that group input, Shift A, and search grid. That was misspelled. All right, grid. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to click and drag on these two, hit 5. I'm going to click and drag on these two and also hit 5. And that's going to give us this right here. Now, if you haven't touched geometry nodes before, don't worry, we're not going to dive really crazy into it. We're going to use a minimal amount of nodes. And if you're wondering why we built the grid in geometry nodes, is it just allows flexibility so we can add faces like this whenever we want to. If we were using kind of default primitives, you wouldn't have that control after applying. All right, let's go ahead and get an instance on points. And that's going to allow us to place some objects onto those different grids. So now let's go ahead and get that object. So I'm gonna hit Shift A and we're gonna go to our mesh primitives and we're gonna go get a cylinder. Right here on the fill type, we're gonna do nothing or none. And then keep your vertices at 32. I think that'll do, it won't be obvious. We're gonna plug the mesh into the instance. Now we have this. We're gonna go ahead and get that radius down. And we're gonna bring our depth up a little bit as well. And then let's go ahead and we want to add a solidify to this, but if we go here to the modifiers right over here and just go ahead and just place the solidify, you're not going to see anything happen. In some circumstances, you're going to have to add a realize instances node, and that's going to allow you to place modifiers on top of this, which is really good. And we're going to bring our thickness to something like this, and we also need to go ahead and bevel it. And then the beveling is purely up to your preference, whether you want to or not. There we go. I kind of want to have a round edge there. And then you can't shade smooth. If I right click and shade smooth, nothing's going to happen. We need to add a smooth node in here. So if we type in set shade smooth, that's going to smooth out everything and we're set to go. Now let's go ahead and animate this so that when we duplicate our objects, they'll be already animated and cut the work out for us. So we need to go ahead and get a set position node. Now we're going to use a noise texture to animate these, but because it's geometry nodes, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. We're going to need to go get a combine XYZ. We'll plug that into the offset. And the reason why is it separates your XYZ obviously in the name, but we only want to displace it up and down, which happens to be the Z, so you can avoid displacing it in other ways. So let's go ahead and get in a map range, and that's going to allow us to accentuate whatever we're going to do with the noise texture, which we need to add next. We'll plop it over here to 4D, it's very important, and plug your factor into value. And then what you can do with this map range is just play with it until you get a strength that you're happy with, something like this. And then if you hold down Shift to get a smoother motion and play with the W, you could see, is that what you want your animation to look like? To me, it's a little too dramatic. So I'm gonna bring it up. And I think this will do, maybe a little bit less dramatic. All right, I think we're happy with this. Let's go ahead now and animate this. So what I'm gonna do, make sure your W is at 0. And then in your keyframes, I'm going to go to Edit, Preferences, and Animation. Make sure your keyframe interpolation is set to linear. There's some shortcut ways to do that, but I always forget, so you guys can remind me in the comments. I'm going to duplicate my noise texture. You can also get a mix node here and set that to color. Plug that there and plug this one here. And I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Right over here, I'm going to go, and you can probably hear my cat jingling in the background. I'm going to bring it up here, and we're going to need to get a timeline. So I'm set my end frames to a 240. I believe that's going to give me a 10-second animation, I think. Could be wrong. All right, so right on the W, hit I, and then bring your factor to 0, and also hit I. Then I'm going to click the back arrow all the way to frame 240. And for me, I like the speed if I go ahead and give it a value of 1. Now, if you've never kind of looped textures here before, the higher the value, the faster it's going to be. So I like 1. If you want it to be slower, you do like 0.5 or 0.3. If you want it to be faster, do 3, 4, or 5. And then bring that factor over as well. And I'm going to hit I and hit I. Now that we're at 240, right here on the W, make sure this bottom one starts at 240 and starts at 0. Hit that. Go to the end, and then go back to frame 0. And since this one goes to a value of 1, this one needs to begin at a value of -1. And that is going to give you a nice loop. I'm going to go to the end of the frame here, and as we can see, it's a looping animation. We looped the noise texture, and it's really, really cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and minimize my timeline. Don't need it anymore. And what I'm going to do now is hit Shift-D on this, and then right-click. And right here you'll see number 2. I'm going to hit that so we can have a duplicate node tree. And then in the cylinder, I'm going to go ahead and bring that radius in. And I'm going to bring that depth up. And then now you can see they're just going to do the same thing. We want randomness. So you can actually add randomness. You usually do it in the W, but since that's a set, we're going to just play with the distortion. So I'm going to bring the distortion higher. And then I'm going to copy that value and paste it on the bottom, because everything needs to be the same here. So now it's going to be doing that. It's a little crazy. My original animation was a little bit more tame, which I guess I can just tame it out, but maybe bring the distortion to 1 on each. Because the more distortion, yes, that looks a lot better. So the more distortion, the crazier it's going to be. Of course, my cat picks right now to record to play with her toys, but I'm not going to stop her. All right, so we have this. Let's go ahead and just keep duplicating. I'm going to hit Shift-D. Hit that 2, and then right here in the cylinder, bring that radius in. And this is really the joy of geometry nodes, is that you can just do all this crazy stuff. I'm going to do -0.5 on the distortion, -0.5. And now we have this, and I think we can do one more duplicate. So I'm going to hit Shift-D, hit that number 2, and bring that radius in, bring that depth up. And then we'll do -1 on the distortion for this one, -1. Cool. Now we have created our scene. So now we have this. Let's go ahead and position him. So I want to get a floor. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, get a plane, scale it up, and then I'm actually going to hide him for a second. Let's go ahead and get this guy to, we'll get our composition now. And we're going to need to constrain or attach these to something. So I'm going to go ahead and attach them to an empty plane axis. And so what I'm going to do in the outline, I'm going to click the empty, then hold down Shift and click the rest of the planes, hit Control P, object, and now if I move that empty, they move. So let's go ahead and animate the rotation of this whole scene. So I'm going to go back to frame 1, click on that empty, and we're going to animate right here. So I'm going to click this. Go to the very end and type in 360, and then click that again. Now we have this going on. And then I also want to rotate it, but the issue is if I press play, and maybe I want to, let's see, if I click on this empty, and I'm going to hit R, it's going to just not do what I want it to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to get another empty, Shift-A, empty plane axis. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the new empty in the outliner, hold down Shift, and click on the old empty, Control P, object. I'm going to go to the tilde key to go to the front, and then I'm going to hit R twice, and now it's going to rotate like this. Now there may be another way to get the rotation to work the way I want it to do, like right here. If you do know a better workaround, please let me know in the comments, but this is my way to do it. Now let's go ahead and get that plane back, click on the empty, and I'm gonna click on the front here and make sure nothing's gonna intersect here on the floor. So right there, it definitely is. So you can bring it up a little bit. All right, nice. It's gonna touch a few times, but for the sake of the tutorial, we're gonna move on. I'm gonna make a seamless background. So I'm gonna hit the tilde key, make sure I'm in the front. I'm gonna hit tab, go to the edge, select. I'm gonna hit E and Z and bring that up. We're gonna add a bevel modifier. Now you can really, this part is up to you. I like to do the seamless background, but if you wanna do something else, that's completely fine. We're gonna do this and stretch it out. Maybe bring it up, apply that scale, and bring my amount back. All right, so now we have a cool background. Let's go ahead and light this. So let's go, I'm gonna use cycles for this. In fact, I think we need to use cycles for the material. If you wanna use a different material, you can just go ahead and use Eevee if you'd like as well. So the first thing we're gonna get is a light. It's gonna be an area light, and we're just gonna go ahead and bring it up. I'm gonna hit S to scale it. It needs to be pretty big. And then let's go ahead and give it a power of 3000. And that's gonna give us some nice soft lighting, maybe 2000. Actually, no, we'll keep it at 3. It's gonna appear darker once we add materials. And then let's go ahead and get a spotlight. I'm gonna hit S to scale it. And then I'm gonna hit G and move it over here. Hit G again. And then I'm gonna hit R twice to point it, like that. And then let's go ahead and get that power to like 40,000. All right, and then what you can do is you bring that radius up, and that's gonna soften our lights. So if you bring it back to the default, see how hard that shadow is? Bring that radius up, it's gonna give you nice soft shadows, and you can also bring your spot size down as well if you feel like it's too wide. I'm okay with where it is now. There's only one thing missing, and is I wanna fill out these shadows and give it something interesting, so we're gonna add an HDRI. So if you don't have one on hand, you can go here to polyhaven.com. They have a bunch of free HDRIs. I'm going to use their add-on and just drag one in here, and then notice how it just made it all too bright. So what I like to do is bring the strength to like 0.3, and what that's going to do is just fill out those shadows rather than if you just bring it to black. See how that looks? But if you bring maybe to 0.4, it's going to help you fill out those shadows but still get enough contrast in your lighting to look cool. Now I'm going to go ahead and get my camera. So bring it up. So I'm going to hit G and middle click. Something like this, and I'm a big fan of an 85mm lens, so I'm gonna do that. I really love how it flattens things out, and if I press play, it looks really, really good. But now we need to go ahead and get our color here. So what I'm gonna do is, in the material section, I'm gonna click new. I'm gonna call it random, because this is gonna be a really cool material, and we're just gonna make it blue for now. But notice nothing happened because geometry nodes requires you to add a set material node. For instances like this, it's unpractical, but once you get really crazy in geometry nodes, it really does benefit. So we're gonna get a set material node, and then we're gonna go ahead and select it, and we're gonna have to go in and add that on each. So I'm gonna go here to the outliner and I'm gonna go ahead and hit Control C on this and go to each one and place that in there. Just a minor inconvenience. There we go. Now our material is on everything. So I want to add something really cool. So we're going to go here and I'm going to click on this outer model here and click on shading. And we're going to go ahead, and this I believe is exclusive to Cycles. So if you want to use Eevee, just go ahead and add whatever material you'd like to use. If you're using real-time materials, I would honestly recommend the basic plastic material, or even in the basic section, the basic scratches. Those are really made for stuff like this if you want to check that out. But what we're going to do here is get a color ramp and pick the 3 colors that we want to use in our scene. So I'm going to click plus icon here, and we're going to go to constant so that it's a hard edge for these. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a dark blue. I'm going to pick a lighter blue, something like that. And then we're going to go with kind of a mid gray. I really like that. All right, so now they're all just going to mix. So we need to go ahead and get a noise texture. That's going to help us distribute color. Now it's going to do that, which honestly, that's already a cool material. But what we're going to do is get in a We're going to get an object info node, and we're going to use the random socket. And what that's going to do is recognize that you have a bunch of different instances, and it's going to randomize the different colors across your scene. And what you can do is you can use the color ramp to show how many have what. And then you can use the noise texture to, goof with that. And what's cool is you can actually, if I bring this back here, that's good. You can actually animate it and play with it and also add some variation into what you're doing. I'm gonna bring the scale up. Cool, I like that. So now we have this, and you can, hey, let's use yellow instead. You can do whatever you want. It's really cool, it's really fun, and you can maybe even bring up your distortion. But that's gonna add a level of randomness to what we're doing here, and it's really fun. All right, so I think we're done. This might be it. So now we're done. Let me just show you the export settings. I recommend using a PNG sequence if your computer is prone to crashing in Blender. I usually don't have that issue, but if you do, go ahead and make a new folder and just select your PNG and just turn that into a PNG sequence. But if you just want Blender to export out an MOV for you, go from PNG to FFmpeg video, encoding to MP4, medium quality to perceptually lossless, render animation, and when you're done, you'll have something very, very cool that you can do whatever you want with. So thank you guys for watching. I'm very proud of this design, and I had a lot of fun making it. Don't forget to check out Real Time Materials if you want to see that, and I will see you in the next tutorial.